How should Christians watch movies? You've probably gone to the movie theaters, and if you're like us in the Church of the Nazarene, you have a long history of people who didn't go to the movie theaters. But you've probably gone to the movies and thought to yourself, should I really watch that? I know within Christian culture, you always hear these different angles of people saying things like, well, Christians shouldn't watch that sort of movie, or if you watch that, that's putting ideas in your head. And if you're somebody who is a believer in Christ and you look at the culture around you, there certainly are things which are against Christianity. There are things which are trying to get rid of Christian tradition. But at the same time, there are some things which are really revelatory about the nature of God, even though they don't necessarily intend to be. If God really is the master of the universe, then he is the master of the universe, and all of creation is either looking to move towards him or they are acting out in spite of him and trying to retaliate against him. So today we're going to have a conversation on how Christians should watch movies. So thank you for joining us. Welcome to Kingdom of the Logos, and we are a Christian program of critical thinking and adventure. I'm Pastor J. Dylan Proctor, and I hope you're having a good time at home. We have a whole slew of people here in the studio with us. Who all is here today?
I'm Pastor Amanda Sparrow.
I'm Pastor Anthony Allegria, and I'm happy that I'm not in just vague purgatory, as Dylan almost said. We like to say that our studio is chord purgatory, but he almost just said purgatory, which would have been bad for all of us.
No, we are in chord purgatory. We should be clear and precise. Excuse me. There are cords and cables everywhere to make us pay for the things we have done. Who else is here? We got one more.
I am Pastor Mike Proctor, and I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to play a game, Buy, Sell, or Hold. We used to call this Hot, Not, or Sanctify, but we've changed the name a little bit. And what this means is we're going to listen to a proposition. I'm going to give it, and everyone here in the studio will answer it. And you at home, you can answer it too. If you'd like to post your thoughts in the comment section, please do. We're going to do buy, sell, or hold. Buy means you like it. Sell means you oppose it, you reject it. And hold means you're going to reserve judgment on this one. And you can only do one hold per episode. We're going to do this with some propositions I have on how Christians should watch movies. Now, again, take for granted you don't know the plot of the movie all the time before you go into it. I mean, that's kind of inherent. You're watching the movie for the first time, though you may have seen a trailer, heard some spoilers. So you don't always know what you're getting into, but generally you have some sort of an idea. And this is just a metric for us looking at movies, looking back on them to decide if it is something which Christians should watch and what we should take away from it. Because really, I have been blessed as I've got to the stage in life where I really do look at everything with a theological perspective intentionally. I watch movies looking to see what is the theology in this. Even if it's not an explicitly Christian film, you still fall into a lot of interesting things. I recently put out that review for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Again, it has some Christian motifs in it, and in fact, the antidote to the evil in it is a Christian motif, so it's a really cool thing. So let's get into this. We're going to do buy, sell, or hold, and let me get into the first proposition. So, one of the questions we have, people say, oh, Christians shouldn't watch horror movies. They plant ideas in your head. They're glorifying evil, they're celebrating evil. But the truth is, it is the moral compass of the story's arc, not the subject of the movie, that matters. So basically, it's the moral compass of the story arc. Take it something like The Conjuring, which, again, the subject matter is evil. It's a demon that is trying to attack a family. Evil is attacking the nuclear family. But the moral compass of the story is God is the solution to this. Evil is attacking the family. The moral compass says God is how you solve this. And it's specifically the name of God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So my proposition is that it is the moral compass of the story arc, not the subject matter, that determines really the value. Anthony?
Another example of this that a lot of you might be a little more familiar with is sort of along this line. Not many of us who are concerned with God associate God with vegetables or anything like that. But, a lot of people really love the VeggieTales.
Yeah.
Everybody I know who watched VeggieTales as a kid loved the VeggieTales. And we can all sit back and realize, hey, vegetables don't really have all that much to do more with God than I do, or like a dog or anything like that. But VeggieTales, the story arcs are communicating a moral compass, which is Christian.
All right, so let's do buy, sell, or hold with this one. We'll start with Pastor Amanda. Okay. Buy, sell, or hold. It is the moral compass of the story arc, not the subject matter, that is important.
Yeah, I think definitely buy on this one because it does help us, I think, to have a better rubric or measuring stick by which to grade if we see a movie or not, or after we've seen a movie to see if that was actually something worth rewatching. Because this is still allowing us. I think sometimes we say, "Oh, the subject matter doesn't matter." Then some people are like, "Oh, we can go watch whatever we want." No, there are still things that are probably outside of the purview of that is good and healthy to watch and to consume and to let our minds think upon. But it's kind of differentiating where that measuring stick is. It's not kind of just like what title or genre is kind of slapped on the movie, or how good the movie is by the critics or by audiences, but it's really looking at kind of the deeper message of the movie. So I think, again, bye.
Bye. All right, Pastor Mike, what do you think?
Well, I want to say bye, but there's a part of me that says subject matter does. It is extremely important, especially for youth and children. So I'm going to go with a reserved bye,
Well,
if that's possible. I only get one hold, so.
But just kind of building off what you said, discretion is always important. Obviously, if you're somebody who's scared to death of horror movies, don't watch a horror movie. if your grandmother has issues sleeping at night, or you've got a 3-year-old, don't watch horror movies. That one's kind of a little bit self-explanatory there. Though I guess you got to kind of point that out in this day and age. But you look at some things, though, like, again, The Conjuring, it clearly tells you the antidote is God. You look at other things like that movie Hereditary, which came out. I don't know if any of you saw that, but there was no evil won in the end because there was no antidote. The people in the movie, they openly said, we reject God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. They rejected the Trinity, and when you do that, evil wins. And, that's the worldview of that movie. A world that rejects God, evil comes and has victory over you. So, I mean, that is a theological thing. It's terrible. It's wretched and evil. And
So if I understand correctly, you're saying the moral compass on that one is wrong from the very beginning.
yeah, it's wrong from the very
Okay.
beginning. And it shows you that. Yeah.
For mature adults, I will say that is a buy for sure for me then.
Yeah. You look at Anthony. What do you think? We'll get all the way around.
I think
for
definitely
the next
buy.
one.
And I would agree with what Pastor Amanda and Mike said also. If I was being a stickler, generally speaking, I would definitely say buy. If I was just going to one-liner tell someone something about this, I would say, yeah, stick to the moral compass. Subject matter is not all that important. If you want to watch vegetables talk, that's you. So, but
and again,
I do think it's important, for instance, maybe glorifying, maybe a movie has a really great moral compass, a hero, he sacrifices himself, all that stuff, but maybe he's like a very, very, very serious, avid smoker, and it's like, well, that's not a good thing to teach young people because that's going to harm them in the long run. So maybe subject matter matters a little bit. There's certain things in there that are corrupting over the course of time, and especially for younger people. But generally speaking, the moral compass is significantly more important. And I think the things that are communicated concerning moral compasses in movies are extremely influential on people's life also.
Yeah, and the reason why I brought this one up, and the reason why I've talked so much about horror films, is because surprisingly, the subject matter of horror films is often demons and evil and wicked things. But the world is filled with wicked things. But somehow, horror movies that are made by secular studios have been immune to the culture wars and stuff going on in modern Western civilization. They still have a moral compass oriented towards God, which is really crazy. It's really shocking, but it's overwhelmingly true. Anthony?
I think there are definitely scary movies which are not oriented towards God at all.
For
and they're
sure.
just graphic
Yeah.
and disgusting and evil wins. And I'm not going to lie, I don't find those entertaining anyways.
No.
And I've never really liked those. But I do have to agree that there are a surprising amount of horror films where God does win the day. And it's sort of surprising.
And it's
grow up with
explicitly
this,
God that wins.
You do sort of grow up with this idea that scary movies are on the worst side of movies and they're inappropriate and things like that, but they frequently do actually glorify God, which is so strange.
It is strange. Scary Stories Telling in the Dark was an example of that. The Conjuring series, very much an example of that. Even back in the old Exorcist movie, which the demon is just graphic and nasty, but I mean, it is a demon. It's in the name. But there's the sacrifice at the end, which, I mean, yeah. All right, so the next proposition I have. So we've established that the moral compass of the story arc is important, but you say, well, how do I find the moral compass? That's a question. You say, well, how do I know? I don't know these people. I'm just watching them on the screen. How do I know what they are? Well, here's a proposition I have for you all. By Sarah Holt, you can find the moral compass in a movie by what the antidote to the problem is. And this is true even if it's not explicitly stated in the dialogue. So you look at something like the Spider-Man films. Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man makes a mistake and he says, I'm going to rise to the occasion. I'm going to go solve this. You look at all the way back, Sam Raimi, the first one there with the Green Goblin, he does something, Uncle Ben dies, and he says, I have to work this out myself. I'm not passing this off to other. I'm not going to be a coward and just kind of retreat back in the hole. I'm not going to take the path of least resistance, but I'm going to own up to my life and I'm going to go out and act on it. That kind of gives you the movie's moral compass, this idea that you have to take initiative. You have to go on the adventure of life. You look at something like It's a Wonderful Life, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Again, this idea that it is family which is important. Another favorite movie of mine is Fantastic Mr. Fox. And that movie's moral compass, he's got the solution. He's done some things. He admits, I'm a wild animal. And while the wild animal part of my nature was ruling over me, I stole some stuff from some farmers. Now they want to kill me and my family. The antidote to this problem is, instead of the wild animal ruling over me, I rule over the wild animal. It's sort of the idea of the carnal nature. We're all carnal natures. We want to do sin. It takes us out to do things. But when you say, I'm going to rule over the carnality, not it rule over me. This is the same thing God says to Cain there in Genesis. He says, you rule over the evil or else it'll rule on you. It wants you. So you find the moral compass of a movie when looking at what is the antidote to the problem. Again, you look at The Conjuring. I love that sentence in there. Ed Warren comes up and says, have you and your family been baptized? The man says, no. He says, you might want to rethink that. And when they're casting out the evil, they do it in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So what do y'all think? Pastor Amanda, buy, sell, or hold. You find the moral compass by what is the antidote to the problem?
I think this can be very helpful. And this one kind of makes you, though, watch the movie carefully. So it may not be a good kind of way of telling if you should watch a movie to start off. But it's really great to kind of analyze the movie while you're watching it, and then, of course, afterwards. In understanding, because obviously if they think, the antidote to use Pastor Dylan's examples, if you're fighting demons and your antidote is to get a bigger demon, maybe not the most orthodox moral compass there. So I think, but it can be very telling. And obviously there are movies that maybe are a little bit more implicit than that, less obvious. A little bit more investigation needs to be had. But I think this is an interesting way. And I think there's other metric systems as well that can be used to help grade a movie's not only quality, but also its morality and its message. But I think that's a really great one to kind of tell. Because you can just look kind of at the end of the movie and be like, okay, main character or characters did this, and this is, and so you can kind of figure out why they did what they did. So I think buy on that one.
You said, talking about, if your solution is to go get a bigger demon, I hate the movie Watchmen. I hate that movie. And I think we can all agree it's the sort of movie that people that are like sophomores in high school, they're like, I'm in smart because I like this movie. And then after you get older and a little wiser, you're like, no, you're not smart if you like that movie. That movie's terrible. And in it, that is their solution. Their antidote is to create a lie of a bigger problem. And that's the antidote to the world's problems.
Which is funny because that's also like the motivation between a lot of recent superhero movies, villains.
Yeah.
Like if you watch a lot of like current Marvel and DC movies, like the villain is always kind of like, they kind of start out where you're not quite sure if they're a good guy or a bad guy. And their whole motivation is, well, if I create a trouble and I save people from that, or I create the solution. And
they want to be the Wizard of Oz.
Right. You're like, no, that makes you the villain. So it is kind of humorous then in this Watchmen movie that was what their heroes did. Yeah. There's a blurring of lines, and that's how you can kind of tell it doesn't have the best moral compass because there really is. And listen, this is not to say there shouldn't be complex characters, but to say ultimately what drives the character, if it is to just be more villainous than heroic, then obviously they're not all that great of a hero.
Yeah. And Watchmen, terrible movie. And so is V for Vendetta. Hate that movie too. It's awful. Very, very unchristian in its setup.
Well, I will say, even it might not have the best aesthetic and all that stuff, but that movie is actively against the church. It uses a lot of symbolism.
Yeah.
I mean, even the symbol of the super oppressive government is like a double cross. It's over and over throughout the movie. I got about halfway through it and I was just like, all right, I'm done. Like I was hoping it would redeem itself. It never did. It just kept on getting worse and worse, and like trying to bash Christianity. I was like, I can't enjoy this anymore.
Before I was able to perceive anything, back when I was in like high school, I saw that movie and hated it. I knew that was just garbage. I couldn't lay a finger on why, but just the worldview, it was terrible. Amanda?
I read somewhere on the internet they thought it was, again, funny how in different genres of movies we find characters' behavior either acceptable or not. In V for Vendetta, the main character is considered the hero, and yet his whole plot is the same as Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins.
Oh, yeah.
So, who is the villain in Batman Begins?
Yeah.
So just an interest, and we are getting way off topic. So circling back around to the proposition on, I think Mike and Anthony have an answer.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, Pastor Mike, the moral compass in a movie can be found by examining the antidote to the problem.
I'm going to buy with the understanding that, obviously, the moral compass is not always great. It can very much be bad.
Oh, yeah.
But that's one way of trying to understand that. And that's with a good movie.
Yeah. And this is just a tool to help you as you're watching it. Again, the whole title is this, How Should Christians Watch Movies? You watch it and you're trying to figure out if this is good or not. Look at the main problem.
There's always a concern because, our moral compass shouldn't come from movies.
No, absolutely
not. That's 100% for sure. But we have to understand when we watch movies, they do influence people's moral compass. So
and again, we're not here saying that you should find movies that you design your life around. We're just saying when you watch movies and you want to have more of a theological insight to them, these are some little tips and tricks we're giving out. Anthony, what do you think? Buy, sell, hold on this one.
I would definitely say buy. Additionally, I would also say that you can also ask the question, to what is goodness being attributed? Which that's sort of a complicated way to say that, but I couldn't think of any other way to say it. But what's the movie trying to say is good? Is it good for you to be of the mindset and philosophy which says, I just want to be me, and what I think about myself matters more than anything like standards or any sort of aspirations more than just myself and that sort of thing? Or is the movie saying something else about how you should be living your life and what the right philosophy for life is? And so, that still is sort of the same thing as answering the question, what answers the problem? Because in a movie like that, the problem is life. How do you live life? And then their answer is, well, you can live life by, just being yourself and YOLO and that sort of mindset. And there's lots of other answers to that question that I think are a lot better. And that's another thing that's good about Dylan's question as well, is that every plot has a problem. At least I hope it does. Otherwise, it's not very interesting.
Unless it's the Starfighters movie or whatever it was that Mystery Science Theater did, where it had the pilots. That movie was terrible. No plot at all. But all right, one other thing. People are probably watching. Well, everybody's buying this stuff. If you can sell, if you think there's a better solution to what I'm saying. So again, healthy disagreement's fine. I know last week we did another buy, sell, or hold, and people were like, "Hey, don't be too hard on one another." Look. In the church, we have a problem where people aren't familiar with healthy disagreement between Christians. They kind of want to say, oh, well, you disagree with me on this song, so I'm going to pack up my stuff and leave. We have unity in essentials. We look at the Apostles' Creed, we look at Scripture, we have unity. Then we have liberty in non-essentials. So it's all right if we have differing opinions on stuff. So you can sell if you think there's a better solution than what I'm saying. So...
Talking about healthy disagreement, on to topic 3.
Oh my, this one's going to be really contentious. Please hang with us. We're not here to cause division. We're just here to stir your minds. Please don't come in and get us on this one. Though, if you do want to send pitchforks, we'll take those too. 6186 Eaton Creek Road, Jolton, Tennessee. So, not everything from a Christian studio portrays the gospel well, and sometimes non-Christian movies and non-Christian studios portray the gospel well in spite of themselves. So this is the next buy, sell, or hold. Mm-hmm. So by this, I'm basically saying sometimes you're surprised that Christian movies aren't as Christian as they should be. I know back when I was a kid, there was this whole trend of end-time movies that got really out there. Mm-hmm. They were just somebody's crazy end-time Christian fantasy. But they were from a Christian studio, so a lot of parents were like, well, you got to watch this, this is orthodox. And then there's some things which are not Christians, things like Wonder Woman, where you've actually got someone who's more like a Greek god than something for Christianity, but it has a lot of elements of Christian culture there within it. And in spite of the fact that it's not explicitly Christian, it actually is portraying the gospel pretty well. So what do y'all think on this one? Buy, sell, or hold?
I think this one's really good to help us to make decisions kind of on the front end of what movies we watch and even how we watch movies as well, obviously. Because, again, I think a lot of times we give up kind of that judgment. And when I say judgment, I mean deciding between things. We give it up to other people. And it's not to say, like, if you look on IMDb or Rotten Tomato or some other of these, what's the Christian one that, like, rates movies for you? Plugged In. That's not bad to have those resources, but if we, like, just say, okay, as long as it's got, like, Kirk Cameron's name slapped on it, then I can watch it, and there's no other critical thought brought into it, I think we've kind of dug ourselves into a hole a little bit. And so I really like this thing because it's challenging us. I like this proposition because it is challenging us into really thinking about what we're watching before we watch it, not just because it has, this studio behind it, or this producer, or this director, or this actor or actress, but that it's really something that can be good or bad or just silly, because we're judging it based on its merits, not by, again, the kind of the Mickey Mouse sticker that's going to be slapped on top of it.
Yeah.
And listen, Christian movies are Christian movies. I don't particularly, I think, again, we say, oh, it's a Christian movie, therefore it has Christian morals. Well, one, it may have Christian morals, but they may not be the ones from your tradition. They may be more fundamentalist or more charismatic than yours. So just because it's Christian doesn't necessarily mean you're going to agree with it. And also, I think a lot of movies, secular or Christian, can fall into this category. They're just shallow. And there's only so much you can do in an hour and a half. I get that. Or 2 hours. But don't think you're the great, treatise on, you're not going to compare to Augustine or Thomas Aquinas or John Wesley just because you can make a movie, no matter how great you think it is. So I think there's caution that needs to be had, even in Christian movies, that critical thinking does not get to just go away.
Okay. So, Pastor Mike, buy, sell, or hold on this one?
I'm going to buy. And I think, I got behind a van today, and it says Jesus Rocks, and there was a, more, like a picture of Jesus with a halo around his head holding a guitar. And so, it looked like a Scooby-Doo van. And so this is the thing. I think Christianity is so wide in what people want to worship, so they just slap Jesus on it. So I think when we get to anything, whether it be a movie or whatever, just when it's labeled Christian, we still have to look deep to see what are they really, what is the message in this. So I'll agree with that. And occasionally secular, there's a lot of things that reflect some absolute good things that God has done in the secular world. So,
sure. Yeah. And again, I know I talked a lot about the Conjuring movies, but I just brought up Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman as well is a really good film where you get this idea of someone who is kind of naive to morality, thinks, I can go out and kill Ares and everything's good, and she kind of finds out that evil is not so easily defeated. And then there's that whole final scene you see with Trevor. He kind of flies up in the air, and you're like, man, I really like this guy, but oh gosh, dude, you gotta blow yourself up. Like, not because you're committing suicide, but the sacrifice is necessary for the good to happen. And that's really, Jesus goes to the cross. You see, even going back to the Old Testament, there's a lot of things which come at a great cost. Coming out of Egypt came at a great cost. You see with the early church, how many people were martyred and for the sake of what is good and what is of God. And you do see that in a lot of things. I know Anthony mentioned The Exorcist earlier, where, some evil, it really wants to have a victory, but if we're honest about life and we're honest even about Scripture, evil comes to God and says, let me have the body. Evil can't care for a soul. It can't take your soul unless you give it to you. This is the whole deal with Genesis. God says, don't let that rule over you. You got to rule over it. But there with Job, you see Satan, he comes, he says, come on, God, let me have his bones, let me have his corpse, come on, let me have that dead body. Because Satan can't care for a soul, but he will gladly take a body. Gladly. But the soul, the breath of life, that goes back to God. Satan can't have it. And you see a lot of Christian movies, they kind of want to shy away from that, the truth that there's a lot of nastiness in the world. Evil, it really wants that corpse. And sometimes the heroes die, but that doesn't mean that evil won. Just because they got the body. Satan can't have the soul. Can't care for it. Anthony, what do you think on this one? Buy, sell, or hold?
I need to remember what this one is. I'm just playing. So, yeah, definitely buy. Though I will also say it's scary how many Catholics under the table make movies. Because they make a lot of movies that they don't tell anybody about. they're really heavily involved in, like, for instance, the making of Gattaca, which that's an older movie, but if you just see the title, you read the description about it, everything else, you'll be like, nah, that's not an explicitly Christian movie. And then you get into, like, some of the symbolism and the producers and things like that. It's like, holy cow, yeah, this is, like, almost entirely Christian. So it's just a funny thing to note. They make a lot of, I think, really good movies that they don't take credit for. It's like they're sort of their own trick there, but it's kind of funny.
All right, well, the last one I've got for us today, and then I'll give a stab at our favorite movie and what element of the gospel it portrays. But for proposition number 4, if God truly is the master of creation, God is the one who sits in the throne of heaven and rules over all of creation, then all art is either pursuing some truth of God's nature. So not all of God's nature. It's not trying to element everything of God, but it wants to take one aspect of God's nature and put this into the movie as saying this is what's good. Or the art is in spite of God's nature. You get something like V for Vendetta, totally in spite of God's nature. You still get something like The Watchmen, also totally in spite of God's nature. You find things like that which are just totally in spite of it. They're based on lies and other stuff. Then you get other things which, I don't know, take something like Fantastic Mr. Fox. I mentioned earlier this idea of you rule over the carnal nature, not it rule over you. That is a truth of God. God has revealed that to us. It's not the whole gospel package in there. Wasn't meant to be, but all art is either in pursuit of God or it is in spite of God. What do we think about that? Buy, sell, or hold?
Okay.
Pastor Amanda, I'll let you start with it.
I think there's something interesting about this, and as I was trying to decide where I like the thought of it, but I think there needs to be room to also say that sometimes things, some things are just silly. There's more than just 2 theological categories. Sometimes there's 7 and sometimes there's 10, to paraphrase a professor from Tribeca. There's insanity in our world. There's silliness, there's weirdness, there's indifference. And so I think I like the element and the thought process behind the statement, but I think we need to be careful not to try to over-reduce things into either A or B. And also I was thinking, I think it was the Transcendentalist, and I think it was Edgar Allan Poe that said this, that he believed that his art, his writing should not teach, that they should simply be stories, and he wrote scary stories mostly, and that they should just, but yet, if you read all of or any of Edgar Allan Poe's poems or scary stories, there are lessons to be learned in them. But his idea was not that they did not have to be explicit in order to teach. They did not need to conclude with the moral of the story today is be kind, right? It didn't have to be that kind of explicit. So at the same time, I think everything teaches. Every story has a meaning to it, whether we intend or not. However, again, I think we should be careful not to oversimplify. So I say all that to say, if I have to go with a buy, sell, or hold, I'm going to say hold. Because I think it's a good thought, but I think a lot of caution and, again, comprehensive and critical thinking need to be applied within it.
That's fair. And by your argument, I would have just gone ahead and sold if I were you. But fair enough. Fair indeed. Pastor Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm going to sell.
Sell. Okay.
That's sell. I don't agree with that. I think a lot of art may fall into that category, but I think some of it is just has none of that in mind when it's being created. I think it, like Amanda said, some of it's silly, some of it has no rhyme or reason. I guess you could say that's towards chaos, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to sell that because I think there's something behind the beginning with that statement that says it either starts with that understanding of where it's going, and I don't see that in all art. So I'm just going to say I sell 100% on that.
So you're making the argument that it's subjective. Amanda's making the argument that there should be more categories. And I would like to point this out, though. Nowhere in my statement does it say that it is intentionally either moving towards God or intentionally in spite of God.
I'm going to sell it anyway.
Because you do find because people are a lot more complicated than they are self-aware. Mm-hmm. Like you find people who are unintentionally doing, like Jonah has no intention on being a prophet. He sets out on Nineveh to not be a prophet, and he ends up being very successful as a prophet. He even gets
hates it.
He hates it, and he even gets sailors to make covenants with God. So just because someone intends on doing something doesn't mean that's going to be the outcome of their action. And that's really where I'm coming from this. regardless of what your intent is, you can't escape God. Like if we use the Socratic method as ask how, why, and go all the way back, you're going to either get towards God or you're going to find yourself spitting and gnashing in teeth and being a little monster. All right, but fair enough. I'll accept it. We're fine with that. Anthony, what do you think? Buy, sell, or hold on this one?
Well, you have clarified now, so part of my prepared answer just got axed. But I would say I'm going to hold. And it's mostly because I agree with it a lot, but also I do think that there should be more categories, but more categories to represent the intention of the work. Because there are some things that are just silly, and we're going to see that with my favorite movie, I think. And then beyond that as well, I would also just add like a little addendum to my own comment and say that at the end of the day, though, pretty much all art is going in one direction or the other generally, or at least aspects of the art, different aspects of the art are either representing truths concerning God and God's intention for creation and nature, or it is actively going against aspects of God, aspects of God's creation for nature, and just nature in itself.
And God is a God of order. So movies that are created in nothingness, those two are against God.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was saying whenever movies
God,
try to push away from the
those that are pushing towards the void, that's in spite of God. All right, so let's end this out. And again, send us your thoughts, questions, comments on all of this. Yeah. And I was actually glad to get some contention there on that last point. It's a little bit of fun when we have some debate around here. I like that. It's not bad. It's fun. It's enjoyable. So I want us to end this out with saying, what is your favorite movie and what element of the gospel does it portray in it? So we'll start with Pastor Amanda, and we'll come back around.
See, I was the one that was still debating. I think you need to start with someone else. Yeah, Anthony's eager to share. Let Anthony share first.
All right. I've got this. So, for now. So, all right, my favorite movie, I think, of all time. I can watch this movie literally anytime. I think I watched it twice the other day. There's actually another one I've got in mind, but I'm going to keep that one to myself. It's a kid's movie. But anyways.
Well, no, you got to say it now. You can't just tease us like that. You can't just be a tease over there on the camera.
All right. This is not my favorite movie. And this is almost like I'm confessing a sin. I did watch this twice by myself. It was the movie Trolls.
Oh, gosh.
I can't believe I watched that twice, but it was really good. But anyways, it's not my favorite movie. My favorite movie's probably got to be John Carter of Mars. And in it there are depicted like immediately like different masters of the universe. She's got sort of like her messenger angels and things like that. And it's almost like her will for creation is almost like destruction or something. It's weird. I don't know exactly how it works out. So there's parts of the movie which are like definitely you could say like if that was a statement about God it would be bad. But on the flip side there's also parts of the movie which are very representative of God in that it's depicted as good, that the heroes are fighting her. And so it's like, there's lots of good things about the movie also that are being depicted about what's right and wrong and that sort of thing. And then there's also lots of other good and bad stuff. It's just so jumbled up. I honestly just think it's just silly. I don't think I can't stand to watch a lot of movies that have a direct political or theological agenda with that are against basically what I believe. That might sound kind of closed-minded, but it really just kind of makes me mad because I know how influential it is, and I know people see those movies and they're like, this is my proof, And so that sort of is kind of irritating to me whenever I'm watching it. It just kind of ruins the whole thing. I used to be able to get past that and watch it. Now it's just sort of irritating, so it just sort of bothers me. But there is this movie, John Carter of Mars. It's so in the middle. Yeah, I don't think it has any real agenda or statement about life to make. I think it's just supposed to be entertaining and fun, and it is for me, so...
So, all right, Pastor Mike, what's your favorite movie and what? And emphasizing what here, just for the record, what element of the gospel does it pray? If somebody's listening to this, they're looking for a movie, tell them what element of the gospel can you view in this?
Oh, I got two movies, so I wanna go with my first. I think it kind of dates me a little bit, I guess, but I like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusades, and I think when they're trying to find which is the holy grail, they actually say, well, it's got to be this one because Christ was so humble. And that probably is one. But more recent, this is a $125,000 budgeted movie, so it's not, probably it didn't show in every theater.
Or any.
Well, maybe not any. I will say this, though. I like to watch Bigfoot movies, and y'all can make fun of them if you want to. Everybody's got their own little weird thing. We can make fun of Anthony for sure on not seeing Star Wars. So
For the record,
pitchforks are
Mike
coming.
does not believe in Bigfoot. Just throwing it out there. This is the internet. People can interpret things
Hey,
the way they
now,
want.
hey, don't
No,
put
wait a
my
second.
belief system out.
Now wait a second. Now, if what Anthony is saying is contrary to what I suspected, so I don't know where this is going.
My belief is
Well, just let Pastor Mike speak
Y'all
for
quit trying to
himself.
say what I believe. I will say this: Something in the Woods is a great $125,000 movie. It's got a setting of in the 1960s. So, are you going to see a 2012 car roll by there? Maybe. It's a low budget movie, but it has it is about Bigfoot. But at the end of the day, the storyline, the arc, I believe, is that sometimes the real monster is not just out there, but it's ourselves. And looking at some of these situations that occur over and over again, and the movie does a really good job of semi-addressing it, but they leave it open for a conversation to be had among people. And so there's some really good stuff in there that's bad, but it's left open to say, hey, why did this happen? And it's truly it's good. Sometimes our own worst enemy is ourselves.
Started out rough, but Mike for the win.
All right, Pastor Amanda, what do you think?
All right. Well, oh man, I have so many movies I love, but I think what I'm gonna go with is Star Wars, and I know Anthony has not
The original
seen.
trilogy?
Okay, I'm gonna go with all of them, and then
Okay,
I'm gonna break
okay.
this down. So you gotta hear
Everybody's
this.
snitching on me.
No, Anthony. Anyway,
All of the original trilogy, or just the whole universe?
The whole universe.
Okay,
And this,
okay.
and I cannot speak for what. Okay, at the time of this filming, The Mandalorian hasn't come out. The last Star Wars Episode 9 hasn't come out. All the different series that they're projecting haven't come out. So I can't speak for all of Star Wars of all time and all space, but for the current movies. And I think what I love about them is that. Kind of very similar to what you talked about with Wonder Woman. Evil keeps coming out, and it comes out in different ways, right? So in the original trilogy, it's Darth Vader. It's a very obvious, almost like an old Western where the villain is because he's wearing the black cowboy hat, right? So Darth Vader, obvious villain. In the prequel trilogy with 1, 2, and 3, it's a little bit, you're not quite sure who the villain is, and the villain kind of changes, and he hides behind all of this intrigue and conspiracy, and then the modern movies, again, you kind of have this revivalism of an old classic villain. But maybe there might be, hinting into what comes in Episode 9, the villain may be more amongst us than we realize. But what I like about it is that each time, each new generation has to take up the mantle of fighting evil. And I really I know a lot of people hated how they how they cared for the character of Luke Skywalker in Episode 8, because he was kind of old and grizzled, but I like it. I really like that portrayal of Luke Skywalker because to me, that's what, have you ever met a pastor that's been preaching and pastoring for 20, 30 years? They're tired. They're exhausted. They fought the same battle 100 times over, and they have to fight it again. Luke Skywalker, he goes and he tries to get his father to turn to the good side, and now his nephew has turned to the dark side. And it's I can get that exhaustion as a minister of barely 6 years. I can resonate with that exhaustion. And yet, even with the feeling like you're just beating your head against the wall because evil keeps coming each new time, each new generation, and yet we are still called as the people of God to rise to the occasion, to call out evil when we see it, and to fight against it. And I do think the best Star Wars movie is Episode 4. That's just a fact. But the second close to that is Rogue One, because again, we can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fight evil and to stop oppression. We have to take charge. So I think that is my favorite. Those are my favorite movies, and that's the Christian element it reveals.
Of any Star Wars movie that's not the original trilogy, Rogue One is the best. Rogue One's great. I hated that droid that's in there, but it even makes you feel bad for it when it gets destroyed. But
You know, we said earlier the most contentious thing we said was this whole thing about Christian studios not always portraying the gospel well. Well, I disagree with that. I'm gonna have to sell on that now because what y'all are saying right now, you're dropping some big facts. People care about these things.
now I was
This is
about to say you
contentious.
can't weigh in on this because you haven't seen all Star Wars. But Rogue One is really good, and the fact when everyone makes the sacrifice in the end, you're like, all right, this is really how this sort of thing plays out. Like,
Yeah.
but all right, so my favorite.
Before you say your, go ahead.
Well, I've already said it once, so this isn't going to be a big surprise, but then I'm going to break the rules. I guess since I'm the host over here, I can do that a little bit. I'm going to include something that's not a movie. I love It's a Wonderful Life. The older I get, I can't believe I'm saying this about something that's not explicitly like an action movie. Like the 13-year-old boy in me wants to be like, no, it's Indiana Jones, the Temple of Doom. Those alligators are awesome. And they're also indicative of evil. Like you're just trying to like finish your life mission. You got problems, and there's these alligators just happily spinning around up under a rope bridge, just waiting to
Tear
eat you.
you up.
Yeah, that's an analogy for life. You know, Anthony, we got to work on your car. You got to get it up. The alligators, they're just going to take joy in eating you when problems come. Anyways, my favorite, It's
The
a
hot
Wonderful
asphalt.
Life. It does portray the idea that God calls us to be family. You know, you want to go on the adventure. You want to go around the world. You want to go do all this exotic stuff. But yet the thing that matters most is what is there locally. You know, there's some shallow stuff in that movie, like the whole angel and stuff like that. You know, it's sort of a shallow take on what an angel is. But then the deeper message of the movie, you know, the antidote is, I actually love my family. You know, you come home and say, hooray, I'm going to jail. This whole movement where you realize the love of life. The greatest thing is family. It's the adventure that God has been calling people to since our most ancient ancestors. You know, that is where the true joy is found in life. That is what God desires for you to have that love, to be part of that, and to be blessing the people around you, your neighborhood, expanding beyond the family. You know, being that sort of person, that is who God has called us all to. And I love that movie. It portrays that so well. So well done, too. So well cast. But breaking my own rules, my favorite story of all time, and one of the most theological things I think I've ever encountered, is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I read 8 different Jules Verne novels. Now I love them all. But 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is an amazing novel. It's about a man who basically says, I want to go back to the void. I want to reject the order of God's creation. And really complex character, Captain Nemo. A lot of movies, they try to simplify him and make him 2 or 3 dimensional. He's way more complicated, way more nuanced than that. And Kansei, the sort of opposite of him, the servant there. Oh, it's great. But anyways, send us your thoughts, questions, or comments. Again, check out our other stuff. We, of course, are podcasts. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, a lot of different places. Facebook, YouTube. If you want to go to YouTube, you can check out our movie reviews. We're going to start doing those regularly. The first one that I kind of kicked things off with was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. We're going to do more of that. Another thing that we do have, again, we have a new website. We're trying to get articles and things out there. We're trying to get more people involved, try to have more writers and authors and things involved. Though, again, it's just a few of us here right now getting those things happen. Check it out. It's kingdomoftheLogos.com or kingdomoftheLogos.org. Both of them will route you there. So check that out. With that, we hope you enjoyed this. Send us your thoughts. God love you, and have a blessed day.